A number of countries around the world, including on the African continent, are currently participating in a pilot program to test statistical methodology developed by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to measure the nature and scope of illicit financial flows, or IFFs, out of those countries.
The main objective of the Illicit Financial Flows project is to measure illicit financial flows, or IFFs. To attain that objective, the project has three main components. The first one is to develop a guidelines to measure the IFFs. Second, to develop the data infrastructure, which contains the necessary data to measure the IFFs. And finally, to use that data from the data infrastructure to have the estimation. In these three components will ultimately help a country to measure IFFs.
So we think that pilot countries will benefit from this project because IFF is a crucial issue on the African continent and mostly in resource-rich countries who are losing billions of USD since years due to IFFs.
There is value that is being created in Africa, which is then transferred out of Africa.
Each year, the continent is losing billions in terms of crucial financial resources that could have been used for sustainable development.
By their very definition, illicit financial flows are deliberately hidden. IFFs also take many different forms and use varying channels, and as a result, they have historically been difficult to measure and ultimately control.
Specifically, in the tax and commercial practices, we are looking at three main types. One is from the trade misinvoicing, then we have profit shifting of multinational enterprises, and we have the flows of undeclared offshore wealth and tax evasion by individuals.
The UNCTAD guidelines provide a suite of methods for pilot testing the measurement of the three main types of tax and commercial IFFs.
So in the guidelines, we have two methods for measuring trade misinvoicing. Method number one is called the partner country method, which looks at the bilateral trade discrepancies, so in their international trade. The second method, price filter method, looks at the identification of abnormally priced transactions in international trade. A couple of methods for profit shifting looks first at, in method number 3, at the tax incentives for profit shifting of multinational enterprises. So essentially, it looks at how different effective tax rates impact declared profits by multinationals in different countries. Method number 4, on the other hand, builds on the available business statistics, microdata, and compares units that belong to multinational enterprises to domestic or non-MNE units and tries to identify tax avoiding behaviors. The last couple of methods looks at the flows of undeclared offshore assets. So method number 5 looks at this by measuring the discrepancy between declared offshore assets by country citizens and what internationally reported data say about those assets. And method number 6, so the flows of offshore financial wealth by country, uses the global level imbalance between international portfolio liabilities and assets to identify global offshore financial wealth and then breaks this down by country.
Some of these flows need to be particularly carefully considered as they generally arise from legal business transactions, and only the illicit part of cross-border flows belongs within the scope of IFFs.
What is usually illegal is also illicit, but there can be a number of activities and practices that can be formally legal, but still many people would consider them as illicit from, for example, from a moral, ethical perspective.
So the draft of the guidelines on statistical measurement for the commercial and tax illicit financial flows is finalized, which means it is ready for the pilot testing. However, the final version of the guidelines will be refined after the pilot testing takes place.
So to be able to estimate those losses based on specific data, that it can contribute to strengthen national policy actions, but also call for improvement of international actions towards curbing IFF in the world.
To join the global statistical move to measure illicit financial flows, visit stats.unctad.org/IFFs or unodc.org.